Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent, and this is the Return to the Dunwich Legacy. This is going to be a review video for that set, as well as for the Dunwich Legacy to a lesser degree. There are 2 points to this video. The first, and the main reason I'm making it, is to tell you what I thought of the Dunwich Legacy, and what my gripes were with it, what I thought can be improved. And the second point is to tell you, as a consumer, is the Return to set worth buying? What does it change? With Path to Carcosa, I had pulled out a lot more cards than this, because Path to Carcosa had a lot more cards that struck me as memorable. All of these sets change a lot. There are new locations and counter sets changed out, but I'm not putting things up if I couldn't immediately tell you what was changed about them. And in my opinion, the Dunwich Legacy was not super meaningfully changed from the Return to set. But even though most of it wasn't changed, if you only care about improving the best scenarios, then it actually does improve what are, in my opinion, the 3 best scenarios in this set the most meaningfully. It's just unfortunate that the bad scenarios in Dunwich are the ones that you think of when you think of Dunwich. When I think of Dunwich, I think of the weaker half of the scenario set, and it's the reason this is the first time I ever replayed Dunwich after my first one, because I'd rather play almost any other campaign, and Return to really doesn't change that. It's still good, it's still Arkham Horror, but dude, I do not want to play Miskatonic Museum or Undimensioned and Unseen again. I just really do not. So that's as far as I can get without spoilers and telling you what's going to be changed. If you care about a blind playthrough of the Return to set, leave now. Getting into what's actually been changed. A lot of scenario sets have been changed out. And while I couldn't tell you what was added off the top of my head, because all the stuff that's been added fits in really well, it's part of why I don't notice what's been changed so much. But consistently, the encounter sets were changed in a way, but very iconic and problematic cards for players weren't in them. Crypt Chill, removed from every scenario. Frozen in Fear, removed from every scenario. Ancient Evils, removed from every scenario. And there are lots of changes on most of these. The encounter sets very frequently were changed quite a lot, and that results in a lot of the cards that people really dislike not having to be dealt with as much anymore. After this point, I won't talk about specific encounter set changes, but it definitely needs to be noted that a lot of encounter sets changed, and generally speaking, I do think it improved the balance and playability of the campaign. But I couldn't tell you, gun to my head, if you asked me how many sets were changed out in the first scenario of Dunwich, I would never have guessed 4. I was shocked it was that high when I started this video. In my opinion, the only big change in extracurricular activities is that if you go here second, it'll spawn a security guard at the administration building. And just like spawning enemies at the start of scenarios is actually a mechanic I really, really enjoy and I like seeing, and it's a meaningful consequence to your decision making that I quite like. With the house always wins, honestly, I don't think it changes anything. Like, there is a different location that you can have half the time. There's a 50% chance it doesn't even do anything, and then if you do get that location, you don't even have to engage with it. I didn't. In its defense, though, the house always wins is a scenario that's kind of gimmicky and hard to change, and it didn't need much changing because it's kind of hard to improve upon it beyond its core idea. It's sort of at the cap, I guess, is how I would say it. Miskatonic Museum. It's got new locations. For the life of me, I couldn't tell you what they were. The last time I played Dunwich wasn't a year ago, because I haven't been playing this game for more than a year. So this is like really clear the example. Like, oh, hey, they took out Frozen in Fear. They took out Locked Doors. I feel like I should remember what this set is, but I've been playing almost exclusively online for the past 2 months. And I don't remember what clamshells are anymore, but I do remember it's a problematic set that has something in it I hate. But the only thing this really does is it makes the agendas active when you're resolving them. I don't know if we ruled it like that when we played or not, but it's obviously like just a rules thing that it wants to clarify. The Essex County Express is one of the more improved scenarios. It has a lot of encounter sets changed, and it does a lot of stuff on the back, but the main thing is you change out Act 1 and 2, or Agenda 1 and 2 rather. And you get this 2-round agenda where there's smoke. And when you flip it, it's this recurring boss enemy. Every time the agenda advances, he's going to spawn in the back car of the train again, and you're going to have to deal with him again. And at this point in the campaign, repeatedly killing a 3-4 enemy isn't like the easiest thing in the world for most characters. If you bought a flamethrower, then congratulations to your guardian, but most people aren't hitting for 4. This is a massive hunter in a scenario where you don't want to move backwards to where it spawns. This adds a lot of like pressure to the train scenario that wasn't there originally, and I really, really like this. The Essex County Express would be a boring walkover without the conductor. the first time you play it, it's terrifying. Like, as a new player, I was like, holy shit, I'm going to die. And I don't even feel like that was me exaggerating the danger I was in. I feel like because I was new, I was really in that danger. I was making bad decisions with bad decks and limited card pools, and I could have just died. But the Return to set needs to add this, because even with the Conductor, it wasn't a particularly hard scenario. Without the Conductor, there would be no tension for me. This is a necessary change. And the fact that it's on the back of Agenda 0, where you have this 2-turn setup window where you're safe, it's so good, because it means that you don't have to worry about the random variants just dying instantly anymore. I am sad there are not specific instructions on this card, though, that say remove the train card that just kills you if you fail 2 consecutive foot tests. Because, I mean, your Mythos bag has, what, 18 tokens in it? What's 18 times 18? There's just a 1 in 324 chance that literally anyone in the game, no matter what their foot score is, auto-fails twice in a row and dies. Like, what the fuck is that? That's bad design. There are people that has happened to. 324 is not even that unlikely. Like, if we go check the size of the Reddit, how many people are on the Reddit right now? The Arkham Horror LCG subreddit has 25,000 members. If we just go out on a limb and assume that all 25,000 of them played the Essex County Express and hit that train car location, probably 70 people on that subreddit died to consecutive double autofail. Like, that's just outrageous. I can't believe that's still in the game. I'm never that worried about it because it's so unlikely to happen to you, but it blows my mind that it was printed ever. Anyway, I do really like the change. I just wish that one train card had been removed, which we can house roll out of the game whenever we play at my table. So it's fine. Oh, Blood on the Altar is such a weird scenario, man. Whether or not you have the Obanians on your back determines whether or not this scenario is a walkover or one of the best scenarios in the game. And I think Blood on the Altar is the scenario where I have to, like, set my foot down and evaluate scenarios based on their best version or their worst version. Because the average of Blood on the Altar doesn't mean anything. Its best and worst are different scenarios. So when I talk about Blood on the Altar, I'm going to be talking about the Obanian Gang has a bone to pick with you version. Because 3 out of 4 possible ways you play the game result in that. If you go to the House Always Wins first, they always do, no matter how well you do. If you go to it second, if you fail, they still have a bone to pick with you. And only if you succeed and rescue Francis Morgan do they have your back. So 3 out of 4 different combinations of doing these scenarios and how you win them result in this happening. In my opinion, the scenario is just vastly, vastly better when the Obanian Gang has a bone to pick with you. Rescuing Francis Morgan just makes this scenario worse. I would always go to the House Always Wins first, just to make sure I don't accidentally rescue Francis Morgan. Because if you do this, one hired gun spawns in play, the other one's going to be in the encounter deck. And these guys are not only hunter enemies that spawn 2 locations away from you, which is a serious problem, especially when they're 3-4 hitting for 1-1. Like, that is not an easy enemy to deal with, like I said when I was talking about the Conductor. Most people who aren't using flamethrowers have a problem with this. But they're also giving Hunted Down Peril and Surge. Hunted Down is normally not the biggest deal. It gains Surge if there are no criminals in play, otherwise it moves the criminals towards you. But now, it'll move the criminals towards you and give it Surge, and it's just a serious problem. I really enjoy just how tense this scenario is when you have to deal with the Obanians. And when they're not there, it's an unmemorable walkover. Because I didn't understand when I watched people rank scenarios why they liked Blood on the Altar, because in our first playthrough, we saved Francis Morgan. And now that I've failed to do it, I understand what they say. And I think what I'm going to do when I rank the scenarios, which I'll be doing at the end of this video, is I'm going to always evaluate scenarios based on their best version. And that's going to mean I have to reevaluate Carcosa at some point in the future and do a doubt run. That's not a problem. I fucking love Carcosa. But there are some scenarios in Carcosa where I disliked them specifically because I did a conviction run and I can't remember the doubt run. And Phantom of Truth is a real boring scenario on the conviction route. Anyways, moving on to Undimensioned and Unseen. I wasn't playing the fighter in this campaign, so our fighter didn't like Miskatonic Museum. But Undimensioned and Unseen was the first time I played a scenario and just disliked it outright. Did not want anything to do with it. This does not get fixed. Instead of killing one enemy 5 times, you now kill 5 different, very similar enemies. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate this. It's a good thing to do. 5 identical broods sort of sucks. But only one encounter set's been changed. And that's all that changes. There's nothing about the random movement or the locations that require them to be at them that's changed. Everything is still just as random as the first one, and in fact, it's actually more random because you can't plan around what enemy you're going to see. Like, it's not a big amount of variance. You're still getting a pretty similar enemy, but why? Why was this changed in a way that made it more random instead of less when almost everyone who plays it complains about the RNG, and all you did was introduce more randomness? It just confuses me. Luckily, the randomness it introduces doesn't make it much worse. It doesn't matter very much, but it's already a terrible scenario, and frankly, I don't think it's made much better. At least they got rid of Frozen and Fear, so that's nice. Where Doom awaits changes out a decent number of encounter sets and adds a decent number of cards, changing the base of the hill, the ascending path, and adding 2 new paths. You can get Naomi if you did certain story decisions, but as I said earlier, if you make those story decisions, you ruin the best scenario in the set, so don't get Naomi. And, honest to God, this is just like the exact scenario I remember. I know that it's changed. I can see Crypt Chill is gone, Frozen Fear is gone, Ancient Eagles is gone. I saw 4 new locations. I couldn't tell you what was different about them, but I saw them, and it is exactly what I remember. So to its credit, it is changing in small ways that are probably improvements the scenario where Doom awaits. But to its detriment, none of them meaningfully change the scenario, and it's still a 44-card event deck for no reason. Lost in Time and Space actually got changes that, in my opinion, have vastly improved it. The encounter sets are changed. If Seth Bishop finishes the ritual in the previous scenario, he gets to be an enemy that spawns. All of that's cool. The biggest change, though, is that Agenda 3 changes, and you start with Yogg-Sothoth and play. Let me briefly check that the original one works how I think it does. I assume that Agenda 3 says spawn Yogg-Sothoth. Spawn the set-aside Yogg-Sothoth. Thought so. Okay. So in the original scenario, Yogg-Sothoth spawns on Agenda 3. And in this version of the scenario, Yogg-Sothoth spawns at the start of the game in this location. When the forced effect on the agenda triggers and tries to move you to another dimension, this location intercepts you instead. This does 2 things. The first is that it always forces you to spend a move action to get back to another dimension, costing you time and actions. The second effect is the more straightforward one. If you end your turn here because you failed this brain or foot 3 test, you don't get to move. And that means that if you end your turn here, while Yogg-Sothoth might not make attacks of opportunity, he will kill you just for hanging out at his location, and 5 horror is kind of a lot to be taken. And then when Agenda 3 comes, instead of spawning Yogg-Sothoth, you just move him from his location and get rid of his old location. So I really like that Yogg-Sothoth is in play from the beginning, that you cannot deal damage to him at the start of the game, that he's just here and a problem. Let's round off the video by updating my tier list. You can see I've made a new one. I wanted the art to be better. I wanted the titling to be a little bit clearer to read. Frankly, I could have used bigger titles, but I don't want to go through the trouble of making it again. So, let's rank them in the order I played them. Extracurricular Activities is a fine scenario. I think it's better than the version of a Phantom of Truth I played, but it will probably be under Phantom of Truth once I play the Doubt version. The House Always Wins is actually just like a huge flavor win for me. It's not a great scenario mechanically, but the flavor of it is so fucking solid that I can forgive it those faults. Yes, it's a scenario where your investigator is like, what do I do? There's no clues to find, and that sucks for them. And it sucks so much that I'll be putting it at the bottom, or the top rather, of B tier instead of the bottom of A tier. But the flavor on it is so on point, and hey, your fighter can't fight either. Neither of you are doing your job in the first half. I do really like The House Always Wins. I would like to rank it higher, but because of how bad it can feel for especially your Kluber in the first half, I don't want to put it any higher than this. Miskatonic Museum. The question isn't does it go in D tier, it's does it go at the bottom or not? And I would rather play it than the Devourer Below. Miskatonic Museum is boring for one of your characters, the Devourer Below is boring and hard for all of them. Essex County Express is it an A tier scenario? I really hate the instant kill train car. The fact that I'm probably house rolling that location out of the pool every time I play this scenario is not a good thing. And I think what actually puts it in B tier for me is that every scenario before and after this one really hits you hard with horror. And this one just does only damage. One of my friends was recently playing Return to while I was making this video series, And he bought Elder Sign Amulet and then almost died to physical damage and took 1 horror in Essex County Express. And while I don't mind they're mixing up the damage types and varying the scenarios, I don't think you should have a generally high horror campaign that deals as much physical damage as this one can. I think there's just enough faults with Essex County Express that I don't put it in my A tier. I do think it's better than House Always Wins, though. Blood on the Altar, though, that's going in A+ at the very least. It's better than the Unspeakable Oath in my mind. A lot of people really, really like the Asylum. I've just not felt the Asylum. I think it's a great scenario flavor-wise. Like, it is one of the best scenarios in the game flavor-wise. When you start going crazy and you become convinced the patients are lunatics and they're out for your blood, and then you finish going crazy and you start thinking there are monsters everywhere, or maybe it's all real, who knows? I really like the flavor of Unspeakable Oath, but I've never felt super engaged by the actual gameplay of it. Blood on the Altar, it's an S-tier scenario, man. If I'm just judging it by its best version, by the O'Banian gang has a bone to pick with you, I like it more than Dim Carcosa. I really fucking like Blood on the Altar. Dim Carcosa might deserve a higher ranking because I did play it with a completely broken Ginny and Lily deck. So maybe I'm viewing it as less engaging than it really is because of how strong those characters were. But for the time being, I'm content to put Blood on the Altar above Dim Carcosa. That scenario, at some point, I had like 6 enemies on the map. And that's not counting the flock of whippoorwills that were flying around after us. It was absolutely crazy. It was easily the high point of Dunwich for me. I think it's like variance in terms of how much fun I was having. I think it's usually not as cool as that. But I think that scenario is so fucking good. Maybe it's not better than Dim Carcosa, but I will always be putting Blood on the Altar in my S tier. Undimensioned and Unseen. Do we give it an F tier? Let's label these and see if it helps us decide what a scenario is. So I've labeled my tier list a little bit more. S tier are the best. A+ is excellent. A is great. B is good. C is fine. D is bad, but F is awful. And F also has an additional meaning that takes up too much space. F is not Arkham Horror. I'm not fighting enemies the way I'm supposed to fight enemies. I'm not moving around the map and investigating to find clues. And Undimensioned and Unseen isn't just random and hard and tedious. It's not Arkham. You have to fight with your brain stat using esoteric formula. There are only like a small number of clues on the map that don't scale to player count. Undimensioned and Unseen is terrible. It's borderline not Arkham as well. It's one of the few scenarios that the gimmick scenario to the point of feeling like I'm playing a different game that I didn't sign up to play. And I think Undimensioned and Unseen is my first F tier scenario. I think it's not quite, but it's almost as bad as Blood on the Altar is good. With Where Doom Awaits, I can't put it in F tier, that's for sure. But I'm not sure I can put it in D tier either, because I don't think it was bad. It's definitely profusely random, right? Like, it's more random than it has any need to be. They just made the encounter deck too big for no reason. And they ran that one encounter card that shuffles the locations just to make the players angry at randomness. It doesn't actually meaningfully set you back. It just costs you one action. But man, is it annoying. The scenario really has nothing good going for it, like at all, right? The flavor is, there's a cult on top of the hill doing a ritual. The mechanics, progress up the levels of the hill, done. The event deck sucks. Yeah, that's the top of D tier. It's almost fine. I would say it's inoffensively bad, but it is bad. Which leaves us with Lost in Time and Space. It's not great. It's too easy to be great. Because it's so easy, it becomes less engaging and I don't care. Just isn't hard enough to matter. And I think it does scale up with player counts to get more difficult and more engaging. It doesn't scale with player count very well. The locations with set number of clues work really well for low player counts and are just a problem for high player counts. And things like the Endless Bridge scale up very negatively with player counts. So it's not balanced super well at 2-player. It's balanced pretty hard in your favor at 2-player. That's what I felt when I played it. Yeah, no, because like in a 4-player game, you draw twice as many Mythos cards every turn. You can have someone dedicate entire turns just finding new locations. All the problems get outweighed by that, and it's just not engaging because it's too easy. There's not enough to think about, and there's too much randomness in the locations that you are thinking about. So I don't think it's great. I think it's almost great. It's so close. And frankly, even though I don't feel it deserves it, I'm going to put it at the bottom of A tier. It upsets me to put it in good, because it's so much better than everything else in the good tier. And looking back over this, let's see if I feel like anything's wrong. You may have noticed when I started this list that the Carcosa stuff has moved around a bit. I'm just messing with this in the background, changing it as I talk to people about it. Or maybe I'm just like thinking to myself and I realize, you know what? I really like the Paladin Mask, but I still like Unspeakable Oath more. Even though Unspeakable Oath's gameplay is a little bit less engaging, its story is still really, really good. And the reason I bring this up is because next time you see this, when I finish the next campaign, the tier list probably won't look exactly like this. It'll be changed a bit, because I've been changing it in the background. I feel good about my F tier and my D tier. Echoes of the Past is a scenario that is borderline not Arkham. The Doom mechanic isn't working normally. You're playing whack-a-mole instead of progressing the agenda like you're supposed to. But generally, the way you play whack-a-mole is by finding clues and killing enemies. So it is still Arkham, and it's fine. It's just janky and strange. And I do think I'd rather play the Return to the Gathering than Echoes of the Past. I'm always judging these by their best versions, which is going to usually be the Return to sets. I think Return to the Gathering is better than Echoes of the Past. I'm shocked I have a Phantom of Truth at the bottom of B tier. I feel like I'm putting it there on the assumption the Doubt version is at least good, because I remembered it being good the first time through. You know what? I don't think Extracurricular Activities is actually good. I think it's just fine. I think putting it in B is way too high. The flavor is kind of nothing for me. I don't know why there are alchemy labs on the campus. I just don't really care about what's going on in this scenario. Mechanically, it's not that interesting. I think I definitely like Black Star's Rise more than The House Always Wins and less than the Essex County Express. I feel good about calling Lost in Time and Space great. I can't say it's better than that because of the lack of difficulty and the bad scaling, but I do think that it's a great scenario. I do think Curtain Call is a great scenario, and I think it's worse than Midnight Mask. And the first thing I realized when I was making these tier lists is that Midnight Mask should be my gatekeeper for A+. If you're not better than Midnight Mask, then you aren't an excellent scenario, you're just great. And I'm very happy with everything above Midnight Mask and the order that it's currently in. I'm happy with this. This is all the scenarios I played on the channel, ranked how I feel they are as a combination of mechanics and flavor. And I look forward to adding more scenarios to this and finishing off eventually. Next up is probably going to be Forgotten Age or Innsmouth. Not sure which yet. Anyways, I've been Rather Incoherent. I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one, whatever it is.